My Savior, my Master, my Lord was being allowed to do this. And I deemed right then and right there that when he got to me, I was going to straighten him out. And so he came. And when he came, he said, "Peter, I must wash your feet." And I said, "No, Lord. No way. You are not going to do this to me." And he looked at me and he said, "Peter, you don't understand right now, but I promise you, you will." And so I looked at him and I said, "I'll tell you, Lord, what I understand. And it's simply this: you're not going to wash my feet." And he looked at me again with that look. I expected to be reprimanded yet again. But instead he looked at me and he said, "Peter, if I don't wash you, you will have none of me. You will have no companionship with me whatsoever." Didn't take me very long to figure out what was really going on at that point. I looked at him and I said, "Lord, if that's the case, then don't just wash my feet. Start here at the top of my head and wash every inch of me, Lord." He looked at me and he smiled and he said, "Peter, there's no need to wash all of you, because all of you have been cleaned. You have been washed. All that is, except for one. But he who has been cleaned need not wash, but just his feet." And then he took the towel off and he sat down again and he began to share with us the importance of servanthood. It wasn't long after this that Jesus took again myself and James and John, and we headed over to the outer area of the Garden of Gethsemane. He told us when we got there, "I want you to watch and pray. Watch and pray with me as I go ahead to spend some time with my Father." He came back about an hour later. We were asleep. He woke us up. He looked me right in the eyes and he said, "Peter, what's the problem? 1 hour? You couldn't watch for 1 hour? I told you, watch and pray that you not fall into temptation." Peter, I understand. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. I know. But watch and pray. And he went off again. We began to watch and pray until again we fell asleep. I don't know how much time passed. I don't know how long he was gone. I don't know how long we slept at that point. But I do know this: when he came back the next time, he tapped me on the shoulder, not in a way as if to say, "Hey, Peter, you might want to wake up." He tapped me hard. He said, "Peter, Peter, wake up. He who betrays me is here." What? What? "Lord, what do you mean? Who's here to betray you? Who is here to betray you, Lord? Put me to him. I'll take care of it myself." "No, come with me." Because see, everything began to happen so quickly. It became one blur. I really didn't know what was going on. It was so dark. All these people seemed to come out of nowhere. Some had torches, some had swords, some had spears. They came out of every direction, it seemed, and they were looking for him. I thought, maybe they won't find him. They can't recognize us in this kind of light. And then I saw him. I saw one of my brothers. I saw Judas walk up to Jesus and kiss him. I didn't understand at the time what he was doing. But the moment he kissed him, Jesus looked at him and he said, "Friend, where did you come from?" Friend, now that I know what I know, I question that remark. The soldiers immediately got hold of Jesus and they began to try to tie his hands. I reached over very quickly. I saw a sword dangling loosely from one of their sides. I grabbed it out of its sheath, and I reached with every intention of taking the man's head off, of who I took aim. But I'm a fisherman, not a swordsman. I got his ear, though. It fell on the ground. Amazingly, here is this man who is about to be arrested. For whatever reason, they're after him with swords and staves and falsities. He reaches down on the ground and he takes this man's ear, picks it up in his hand, holds it up to the man's head. And when he releases his hand, the man is whole again. One of those who was there to take him. And he healed him. You know, Jesus had told us something a while earlier. He had told us that a time would come that we would all forsake him. I told him, I will never forsake you, Lord. He looked at me that day and he said, Peter, actually it was just a short while. He said, Peter, you're going to deny me. Before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. No, Lord, no, I told him. I will not deny you. I will never deny you. There is no way. I will die for you, Lord. He looked at me and he said, yes, you will. You can count on that. But you can also count on the fact that you will, Peter, deny me. So here we are in the garden. And we did the very thing that we said we would not do. We ran. We fled. We forsook the one person who loved us so much that he would do anything for us. I began to follow this faction, if you will, as they dragged him through the woods and back into the city, over into the area of the courts. And I placed myself in a position where I could watch from afar until finally I actually really couldn't see what was going on. I thought I was well hidden. Until this little girl walks up to me and she says, hey, I know who you are. You were with Jesus of Galilee. And I looked at her and I said, I have no clue what you are talking about. Just a few moments later, another little damsel walks up to me and she says, you were with Jesus of Galilee. I know you were. I looked at her and I said, I don't know the man. And I walked away from them until this small group of people came over to me and they stopped me and they said, we know who you are. Your accent gives you away. You're one of them. You're one of his disciples. I've said a lot to a lot of men in my life. I've said things that I know I should have never said. But on that night, I said this for a reason that I would have never dreamed 2 days earlier I would ever say. I looked at them with hate and fire in my eyes, and I said to them, I do not know this man. And immediately, I heard the rooster begin to crow. I had done what I said I would never do. I had denied him. I did my best to keep up. I really did. I tried to watch what was happening to him, but I just couldn't. I couldn't get close enough. Every time I thought I would get close, I would be pushed back. But I'll tell you where I finally caught up. I caught up where I could see that they had handed him this huge wooden cross. I could not even believe at first that it was my Lord. I looked and I saw less than half of the man who I had seen just hours earlier. He looked as if he had been torn apart. He was gasping for breath. He finally fell under the weight of the cross. It was obvious that he was not going to be able to go any further. And so they yelled for this other man. I couldn't hear who he was, but they yelled at him and he came. And at first he refused. No, I can't do that. But they forced him. And they put the cross on his back. And they made him follow my Lord up Calvary's hill. And so to Golgotha, they began their journey. I could not believe that in the shape that he was in, that he was even able to continue walking. And then I watched as they got to the top of the hill. They took this tremendously heavy cross and they banged it onto the ground and they reached over and they grabbed Jesus. You would think that in his condition that they would be a little bit gentle with him, but they treated him like a rag doll and they threw him down on the ground. One of them kicked him, another one spit on him, another one began to curse him, and they grabbed his arms and they jerked them apart so hard, so quickly, that I thought they would take them right out of socket, and they pulled his arms over to the length of the cross. What is he picking up? Why is he doing it? I watched as he took the spikes and he placed them at the base of my Savior's hand. And he began to pound into his flesh. Each side, with each blow, Jesus screamed out, "Ah! Ah! Oh!" And I screamed with him. I wanted so bad to walk over there. I wanted to be there. I wanted to grab the hammer. I wanted to lay down in his place. But I couldn't. I couldn't. They nailed the other spike into the other hand. They took his feet. They gathered them together. They pounded the spike into his feet. All this while he was lying on this cross on the ground. I've seen men crucified before. It shouldn't have been any big deal to me, but those men weren't Jesus. They took the cross and they stood it up. And I watched as they dropped it into that hole. And I'm telling you, as sure as I'm standing here right now, I could feel the earth shake when that cross hit the bottom of that hole. And Jesus cried out. I watched him, waiting to see what he would do. Surely by now he's going to pass out. He can't continue this way. People were laughing at him and cursing at him and spitting at him, throwing rocks at him. Some of those things were literally sticking to his body because his flesh was one huge open wound. I would not have been able to think. I was having trouble thinking just watching. How could he have thought of what came out of his mouth when he looked at these people? And I heard him. He said these words, "Father, I expected maybe now he would ask God to take him off of the cross." But instead he said, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." There were two thieves on each side of him. One began to curse him, began to laugh at him like the rest of the crowd. The other one stopped him. He said, "What are you doing? Can't you see? This man is not like us. He doesn't deserve to die." And I heard him as he looked at our Savior. And he said these words, "Lord, remember me, please, when you enter into your kingdom." Again, I don't know how he did it. I can't fathom how he could continue to talk when he was not even hardly able to breathe. But he looked this man in the eyes, and I could see even from that distance that same love that I had seen so often. And he looked at this thief, this sinner, this heathen, this man who deserved hell. He looked at him